My son, he provided us some documents and Tolkien provided some documents. And where do we want to go?
Yeah, so when Commissioner Ward and I were at the last AMC district meeting, they said the starting point was to talk to the municipality, the cities inside your county. Because I see from looking at this proposed zoning ordinance that, so for example, my guess is the city of Winona will want to do its own zoning. So, but let's say Lewiston doesn't. Lewiston can, for retail permitting, could give us the authority to do it for them. And the key, of course, is what they talked about at that meeting, which is that we must permit at least one sales location per 12,500 of population. Which, am I right? That means we need to permit at least 5.
5.
Yep.
Right.
And we probably should figure out what the other cities are interested in doing. Do they want more? Do they want to do it themselves?
We haven't
Yeah.
heard.
Mhm.
And I honestly think as a planning director, going to send something to, do you know, Ms. Holte, has anything been sent out?
I was thinking maybe we could do some kind of an in-person event
Eric,
some-
could you come up, please?
with training.
Well, I've had two thoughts about this. Are we going to try and restrict it and control it? Or should we just let it go? And we take all the money and take all the money they say we're going to make. I don't know. I've
It
had,
seems to me that 5 is probably enough for the county.
well, I
I
think so.
mean, and I don't personally care.
Marine had sent, I think as a precursor, some of the leading documents that are relatively new
Mhm.
from AMC. And, I was kind of looking that over and just, I think some of the general comments I can leave with you for what it's worth. Lou from our office did speak with the city of Winona, and they're in very, very preliminary. They're not sure, which way they're going to proceed at this point. Earlier this month, I attended the McPisa conference. That's for the county zoning administrators. And we had the presentation from the Department of Cannabis. And a lot of it is still a project in works. Final rulemaking will not happen until the end of the year in gear of the 2025 rollout. With that being said, they did have a pre-application process. I believe that started yesterday. And from what I've seen is 150, 200 applicants have already submitted for that, I think, pre-approval process. And then the final selection applications
Wide, you mean?
statewide,
Not Winona
didn't they have
County.
just not Winona County? It starts in July 25th, I think, for the rest of them, and they're expecting well over 500, so they're gonna have a lottery system to see. Most of my comments, they, in this rulemaking that says that the OCM, that's the Office of Cannabis Management, is going to give an LGU 30 days to approve or to basically certify whether or not they qualify. And, my comments, and I think they were well taken by the office, is that I said, I envision that if we're going to have this type of use in the counties, it takes 60 to 90 days to navigate an interim use permit or a conditional use permit. And I envision that would probably be the standard for whatever districts that we allow these type of uses to be in.
Shorter timeline.
That's more to, it sounds like they were well cognizant that it's going to take up to 90 days to navigate a city or county permitting process. And that wasn't the intent when they drafted that language. But they appreciated the comments. I said, look, it takes quite a while to get these permits through to put on the due process and the public hearings for these. And they recognize that. So I think, we're not going to run afoul of the 60-day law by the process that they had set up. That was my main concern. We just had a survey that went out a week or so ago. We got feedback from 37 counties that participated in that survey, Winona, myself included on that. And it was generally trying to gauge how, as a county, what primary department do you see? 1/3 of the respondents said that they thought there was going to be one department that would be in charge. 1/3, they said that's not determined yet. They're waiting to see what their counties do. And 1/3 of the respondents said it was going to be a multi-department approach. And everything that I've seen, I would have to agree that it's going to be a multi-department. Planning, environmental services as far as land use, sheriff's office as far as follow-up complaint, compliance, auditor treasurer to issuing licenses for these businesses, and also the attorney's office. I mean, I think it's going to be a joint of all the departments that will actually be participating in this, should we do that. Some of the counties commented that they already approved a public use ordinance, and I'm not sure, did Winona County do that? That's where it's basically recognizing that cannabis will be legal, but you weren't going to be able to use it in public spaces, parks, things
The
like
city
that.
started talking about it, but then they
Okay.
didn't finish and they put it on hold, so
Okay.
they didn't decide.
Some counties in a lot of cities, I think, elected to do that. Some counties are looking at passing a moratorium, to study that, to determine what are the appropriate zoning districts and what is the appropriate permitting venue to allow them. Because I've been hearing back and forth, everything from growing. It's, hey, look, this isn't squash and pumpkins and sweet corn that they're growing. I mean, they're high security and they use a lot of inputs and water, and you're going to see a lot of, I think, high security fencing around stuff like that. And I don't know, that's one of the things that are outside the norm, just from talking with some of the other counties. And then you have a processing, manufacturing, then you got a different host of issues. And then retail sales, which is another element altogether. So counties are still struggling on that. I'm just looking through some of the other guidance documents. This was the one that I think Marine sent around. This is fresh off the press. It's dated June 25th. It's called a Guide to Local Governments.
That's
And
something that
This is one,
It just came out.
this is the one we had.
it's in the one email that
Maureen emailed
Marine
me.
had sent.
There was three things in the
yeah,
email.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and there is a model ordinance in there, but I don't think that's a zoning ordinance model. I
You're
think,
right, there is an
it-
ordinance in there, but
Yeah.
it doesn't address everything that
No.
PNC talks about. for sure.
right, it looks like it's more of a general county to look at different elements of it. The zoning perspective is that I think there was one sentence that kind of phrased mainly what a county can do as far as land use, and that may reasonably regulate the location and distance and density, the number of operations that you allow in your county. So we can apply setbacks and we can determine what's appropriate for public review processes. So.
So the townships, in the information that I have a bunch of questions, and maybe you're not prepared to answer questions, and so I should just write them down and send them to you, and I can do that.
Yeah, and Doug had contact with Wilson Township today or yesterday, and they indicated they have no desire to regulate this, that they would, I think.
They would turn, yeah, their initial reaction was that they would let the county.
Let the county do
Yeah.
it, yeah, because I think we should,
But I
Try
think we
to-
should let the state do it. I mean, we should just relinquish all our to the state. Tell them, you figure it out, let us know.
I think we should try to poll the townships and the cities to find out what it is they're interested in. And I think that if they are not, so Bob Bruno called me earlier today and he's like, well, we want the revenue in Richmond Township is what he said. But he was thinking more of like having a growing site there. but he said, can you just make sure that there are a representative from the townships? And well, honestly, I think we ought to, if they do not know enough, then we should try to have a forum and provide education
It's not on their radar. Yeah.
for the other units of government and not just ask them, what do you want us to do? But to actually try to help bring them along so they have can make an informed decision about
Yeah,
what they
and
want.
really understand, I think I just polled a few people just randomly and said, what do you understand about the new laws coming out? Like, nothing. I mean, they just thought, oh, it's a free for all. Oh, I got a couple of them were, I hate smelling like skunk walking down the street. You know, it was comments like that, you know, that's what we had. And I said, well, I brought it up that I think the county needs to start looking at what position, you know, our constituents want on this.
Yeah.
And there's just a lot of unknowns. Nobody really knows. And I don't even know what are the do's, what are the don'ts, what can be, what can't be. I understand the 12-5 rule, things like that. So we're going to be doing math. I did the same thing. Like, okay, pretty simple. We're going to need 5 of them. But now, let's just say the counties all want to go with it, the municipalities want to go with it. What does that mean? Everybody gets an option to do one. You know, where do they end up? How do we begin? Is it a lottery system? Is it based on population? But there again, it makes it kind of difficult. I can guarantee you somebody in St. Charles, and I know who it is going to want one. And, you know, if it passes through, I mean, it's just, you know, there's so many unknowns as to how to look at this. And it'd be really interesting to see maybe just like not necessarily a flow chart, but just like the do's and the don'ts. We can and we can't, you know, and really understand what we have the authority to do and what we don't have the authority to do. And then in that authority we do have, what are our boundaries?
Well, and like,
Because I've read through a bunch of that.
Who gets
and
the money?
And who
too?
gets the money?
Where
And then
does
we look
the
at that
money-
80% and the 20%.
20%?
And if we, and if
20%?
yeah, 80% of the 20s, yeah, exactly. And then you go to, well, what happens if we sell more than the neighboring county? Do we get more money or how does that, how does that work?
Uh-oh,
You know?
you got that chair.
So,
What would be, I'm not a big fan of it, but I, you know, read through here, moratoriums, because there are so
there's
many
a lot of
things
unknowns.
unknowns.
City of Albert Lee did that because some counties reacted to this like almost adult entertainment back in the late 90s, early 2000s, is that they wanted to limit the number and have setbacks, and they were conscientious of where they were going to be located. So, you know, at that time, we had to be careful not to zone them out or completely prohibit them, but we severely limited where they could be. And I think like Freeborn, or not maybe a Freeborn County, but the city of Albert Lee, they wanted to have like basically not only cannabis, but alcohol and other adult entertainment venues where they were going to have a moratorium to study that. So I think if they're doing that to study the issue, they're well in their realm to do that.
Well, and I can say firsthand, having worked closely with when hemp was a big craze before, like all these alternative markets get flooded and then a lot of people lose their butt. But just the funny stories we would hear just in hemp fields, people out, you know, so you can smoke that whole field till you're blue in the face and you ain't gonna get stoned to the bejesus belt by any means, but people would still go out and steal it. I mean, it is an attractant. There is no doubt, even when it's not even an attractant. So we know this is going to cause some issues, especially for as a high dollar crop as it's going to be. I also know and can concur with what it takes to grow it. And it takes a lot of water. There's a lot of very sensitive species and plants. And it takes a lot of fertilizer. So it's a very high dollar crop just on the input side. And just different sexting and different things like that. So it is.
Humidity and air temperature is big with the process.
You've got to have acclimation to get them up from, you know, depending on where they're growing them from. So it's a very intense process. And so it's a very valuable process, which is going to attract a lot of attention.
So do you want to become the guru of all of this, Eric?
I do not. I can let you know my personal feeling is that I'm not a fan. In fact, you know, as far as a health impact to juveniles and everything, you know, if you're doing background research, it'd be interesting to just see what the uptick is going to be to emergency room and urgent care from the health providers and underage people getting into it. It's just the nature, you know,
Yep.
of just being a youngster.
So So some of the other things that I was interested in the sample zoning ordinance, there's a whole bunch of information about having temporary cannabis events, right?
Temporary event,
Cannabis events,
events,
right,
yeah.
like a music festival, but
Yeah.
it's a
Well, like-
cannabis event.
Like
Anyone-
what's-
everything's private alcohol in the city of Winona.
Yes, I know we can't outright prohibit the retail shops, but the one question do we have to permit those events, right?
Those are
So
the
there's a
unknowns.
lot of questions that I have.
Moratorium.
There's a lot of questions that I have just really about this, even just this ordinance. And then I understand that, okay, so my husband told me today that he heard on the radio that there would only be 15 growers in the entire state. I don't know if that's true or not, but,
Oh, no, that's.
but,
would be-
so these were the
By
kind of,
regulation or just,
that was all the state was gonna
Economics.
permit, I
Oh,
guess, I don't
by
know, but,
permitting?
but if we do have people who want to A, grow, or B, open a facility in a more rural part of the county to do the manufacturing,
Mhm.
then the AMC document has a whole other set of considerations.
They have some additional terms that have been rolled out, like,
retail.
a mezzo.
That's right. Yeah, so it would seem to me that just from a zoning perspective, aside from retail, there may be some other work for us to do.
Yeah, and that part of that grow is what I'm worried about, just, as you alluded to, the security and what it takes. It's gonna be very intrusive wherever they put that.
Some counties initially said, oh, it's got to be in the agricultural district, but then a few said, no, wait a minute, that's going to be more like an industrial zone
Industrial.
is what it's bordering on based on the type of compound and what they are. And the AMC document rolls out the term mezzo producer, where they can have over 15,000 square feet of canopy grow, plus up to 3 storefronts that go along with it. So that's going to be one term you'll hear. And then micro is limited 1 storefront, but they can still grow on site up to 5,000 square feet of canopy. So they're struggling with these thresholds, right?
The other things I would love for us to do, but maybe for staff to do, is to give us, so we don't have to have any of this in place till next summer.
I don't know. There's a
Well, earlier than that.
one. What's happening? That's when they can apply, but then
Yeah, and if we
I don't think
don't,
anybody could sell till next summer.
correct,
If the
legally get a
application comes in
license.
and we don't have something put into place,
Yeah, right.
that's my fear, is
We have
that
to-
we really need to get something in place, because otherwise we can't go back and limit that, I
Yeah.
don't believe.
So I was thinking the timeline, right?
Yeah.
Like a timeline for, I assume it will go through, if it's a zoning ordinance, it will go through our regular process.
Mhm.
So a timeline for how to do that, to have it in place when it's needed. And it also looked to me like if we choose to do licensing,
Mhm.
that we have to do annual inspections of the retail
Yeah.
sites.
Yeah.
But we can charge up to $1,000.
it was quite detailed.
For the
Something
permit.
I read. was
And I
quite
would say
detailed.
we should try to charge what will cover our inspection fees, right? And cover whatever other costs we have.
Yeah, I think in the AMC document, it talks
Are
about,
we gonna have to hire somebody? I mean, again, it's a whole different industry.
Yeah.
I mean, what are you looking for? I say a road trip to Colorado here. We gotta
Mhm.
figure out what they did. I haven't read.
Well, maybe you could become an expert, Marcia.
Huh? Well,
You want to become the expert?
oddly enough, my daughter
Don't get
lived
high
in,
in your own supply.
I should call him. My daughter lived in Breckenridge, Colorado when they first, I don't know if she was still there when they approved it. And her boss at the time was mayor of Breckenridge. I should give him a call and see, from his experience, how a community like Breckenridge,
So-
tourist,
Do we think there's a need, being 6/25 right now, as in the date? Is there anything pertinent that needs to happen between now, next meeting?
I don't, at this point, our fallback or default position is kind of like the one we had earlier in the year. If they're looking at retail sales, we're going to treat it like they were just selling, confections. That, okay, is it a retail? How is it zoned? We have to assume that it's going to be a conditional use or interim use permit based on a retail sales. But if we get into inquiries about growing, I guess we can't really distinguish any different of crop at this point. with
So let's say-
distinguishing it.
hypothetically, this is the other one, and maybe there's a simple answer to this. Can a municipality ban it based on the fact that somewhere else in the county picks up the slack?
So let's say we said 5, right? And
Yep.
we passed an
The
ordinance
12. Yeah, the 12.
But-
and there were 10 and all 10 were in the city of Winona because the city of Winona didn't have a limit, right?
Yep,
Somebody in St. Charles, and St. Charles gave us their authority.
yep,
This is based on the scenarios in the back of the book.
yeah, right, which I,
And so somebody in St. Charles
Paraphrase that,
wants
Bruce.
one, right?
Yep.
But all 5 are already taken up. The county's 5 are already taken up because they're all in the city of Winona. I think we could turn them down.
Right.
And if St.
does the
if St.
city
Charles
have the
didn't like it,
yeah.
they could change their law.
Well, I'm saying,
Doesn't
does
seem
the
quite
city,
fair.
does the city have the ability to say no, but the county still has the option to permit 5 somewhere in the county? Could be in a rural district.
No, the way I understand this, let's say that it was St. Charles. St. Charles has is a fraction of 12.5.
That's what I mean.
They have to
Yeah.
have one. They have to allow at least one.
So every municipality has to allow at least one. So we take all our municipalities then
If we say 5 though, then they don't.
they
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah. Well, we got one knocking on the door down in Dakota.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, there's one coming to St. Charles, I guarantee you that.
Yeah, and so, I mean, we've got potential, but you're right.
So
the
you're saying
retail
if we
versus-
say 5 and we have 5 applications that come to Winona and they're full,
5 that's 5 retail. Now, there is no restrictions on growing and manufacturing
We don't
at
permit
this
them.
time.
Well, maybe we give them a conditional use permit, but their licensure, the state licenses.
Right, but there's no restriction on how many acres or how many greenhouses
No, I don't think so.
that, well,
we could
of
restrict.
course, I'm sorry, they haven't figured that out yet.
Well, see, this is that do's and the don'ts, what we can and can't do. That's what I'm trying to get my head wrapped
Uh-huh.
around. Could we restrict it? Could we say, no, okay, we've got this 12.5 rule, but do we have to allow any growing?
Well, I don't know, the growing and the manufacturing of it, that's,
That might be considered a one, and the one exemption is if a municipality wants to have their own dispensary or their own, that doesn't count towards the cap.
Opens up 5 shops.
So-
That's that-
Right next to it, 5 different doors.
They asked it at the AMC meeting, your muni doesn't count towards the count.
Right. But if we open first, we'll have sales. Discount.
There you go.
So Eric, are you comfortable or from a planning perspective, this retail operations? Or should we consider a moratorium till we get it? And I'm sorry, the state of Minnesota gets it more figured out.
Yeah, I think that's your discretion as the policy maker.
Okay. Because I just don't know about even treating them like someone that's selling cookies and candy.
Okay, I honestly feel like, so first of all, there are several places in this town that you can go buy the low potency hemp stuff for 2 years now, right?
Mhm.
The Bluff Country Co-op stuff,
Yeah,
right?
I don't know of any problems, but then I don't
No,
live in
and
the
they
city
keep
where
it
I'm-
locked and they follow the rules and it's what it is. So I honestly don't think it's a major crisis. But I do think if we want limits, then we should be proactive.
I like to be consistent. I hate to allow somebody that comes in early on, we treat it like a candy and, pop shop.
I think it's a good point.
And then we realize, whoa, we gotta,
Got an issue.
we gotta restrict it. So I guess,
And I mean, we can set limits so that it's not by a school and not by a daycare and not by parks where there are kids. And I think those are all good things. And my guess is the city of Winona,
but that's all within the city. So are they,
but for
aggressively-
but I would think for non-incorporated cities,
Huh?
and it's more your constituency than it is mine, right?
So you can't sell it, but you can use it in a park. That doesn't make sense.
I honestly think that you should treat alcohol, cigarettes, and pot smoking.
I
the
live in
same
a
and-
college neighborhood and I have skunk factories everywhere. The windows are open, there's skunk. It's just, it is, that's what it is.
So, what would be the
Higher
downhill
limit.
doing a
Yes.
moratorium?
Well, I think it refers to it as not a moratorium, but an interim ordinance. And from what I can read here, and I need to look at it a little more carefully, it can only be effective till January of 2025. I don't know if you saw that.
Okay.
Yeah, so that gives the board
6
time,
months.
Still 6
January
months. that's-
2025, yeah.
Yeah.
And I would, I guess, instead of jumping into, and it doesn't sound like you want to jump right into it anyways, but these rules, the administrative rules that at least this one publication talks about, being available by summer of 2024. Well, we're here, right?
Yeah.
Summer of 2024. And I haven't seen
About
any
7 days
rules.
ago.
When I used to work for the state, administrative rules were like, oh, we'll get to those. So I,
It gives us confidence coming.
yeah, I know, well, and without
it's just
those
all
rules, if,
Pedelke Smith, Commissioner Pedelke Smith, that's from Olmsted, sits on the governor's.
uh-huh, on the governor's cannabis advisory.
Goes like,
Yeah,
you know,
well, I mean, and there's quite a few areas that were counties and other local jurisdiction governments are waiting for the legislative commissions that they appointed to come up with whatever rules.
Yeah.
So cannabis isn't the only one, but it's an important one because it's so
New.
detailed and it's opened up a huge Pandora's box as far as I'm concerned in terms of the laws that need to be, I mean, there's so many different ones, like how many plants you can grow, how many,
So
so
if this is a scenario, if we do this, what'd you call it, interim?
interim ordinance, it's called.
Interim
now, yeah.
ordinance. If we do this, the safeguard of doing this is that if we aren't aware of something that somebody else is and they come in and go, well, I did this document, that document, now I've got you.
Mhm.
This would shut that down and at
The
least
buffer.
it's the
Yeah.
buffer.
Mhm.
And I think that's smart, especially
who's
for
the guy
something
that's
that's
supposed
new.
to know? We're talking
So-
cannabis.
According, no, according to, let's say the Star Tribune, because I can't find a government, that you wouldn't, Minnesota will not, licensing should fully open sometime in early 2025. So
At a
there
state.
won't be retail sales anywhere until sometime next year. My question is the interim ordinance needed?
Well,
Or do we
think
have
so.
that buffer
I think
anyway?
you should, well, I think you should have an
Like
interim ordinance so that you can study and decide what, and also, I think you mentioned, talk to the cities.
Yeah.
That's
Yep.
important.
And I think the
That's one of
townships.
And
Oh,
the,
yeah,
and the,
the
yeah, I
township
mean,
will.
all of it,
And I
yeah.
think do education if that's
Right.
what
Well,
they
Well,
need.
And the due
wants it,
diligence and maybe a little safeguard to the community and the township's municipality. That would just give them a little peace of mind that
Mhm,
we've said,
right.
okay, stop. How do we know what we don't know?
Right.
We could be
There's
missing
so
something.
much that-
This just
It's
puts
so
it,
many.
yeah. So I would be all in favor of supporting that.
Yeah.
For the time being.
Okay, so we can put something together. for
Yeah,
that.
so you have to put something together for the next,
Next meeting.
is everybody kind of
That's
in the
possible,
same
yeah.
Yeah.
July,
thought process and all that stuff
July.
some more?
Doug.
July
just let
9th.
them know.
Yeah.
I'll let them know what the discussion was.
Okay, so
But yeah,
And I
Yeah,
know
I guess
AMC is
I'd be
working on trying to provide us
Aaron's
with much
advice.
information.
They are, yeah, it's still a moving target. In fact, the survey I seen from the counties that did, some had regret that they tried to draft an ordinance because they said it's still changing and they regret that they put some work into it
The
already.
questions I did have is if the rule, the 12.5 rule also applies to the low potency hemp, because here's the thing, there are plenty, the liquor stores and Two Fathoms Brewery and a number of places that are currently selling the hemp,
Yeah, is that gonna change?
Delta 8 and Delta
So you're
9.
saying it-
And I would not want to shut them down inadvertently with this moratorium.
So does it
but we
apply?
didn't-
Nobody could answer the
I
question.
don't know the answer to that.
I think what's legally for sale now without their license is probably still going to be continued. I know they have terminology and definitions that kind of decipher what's allowed on the, at the,
All within the city of Winona. So that-
it's,
Oh.
it's all over the place, yeah.
All those places.
Those
Big
places
city.
are here, well, and in Goodview, right?
Okay.
And my guess is if the tree hugger people in Nodine got their thing open before,
Nothing? Yeah, well, it's. not-
but I mean, for sure, I bet they do sell those products in the Caledonia store, but that's not one of
Yeah,
them.
Caledonia's, yeah, up and running,
I don't know everywhere else that might be selling hemp products.
but we didn't have to license those.
No.
No.
Well, wait, no, we
No.
licensed the Dakota one.
But that wasn't but not the hemp part.
No, no.
just the business part.
Yeah.
So, but I would not want to inadvertently disrupt their business. That's
Oh,
all
I
I'm saying.
agree.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah. If they're legal today, they should continue to be legal. So I think what we need to maybe do is come up with especially, and I totally agree, we should let the townships and all the small municipalities and everything, but
Find out what they want.
find out what they want and us to provide them some knowledge. So come up with a Q&A.
The do's and don'ts or what we
do's
can and can't
don'ts,
do
or
and what the
if you-
parameters,
You don't want to hand it.
little handouts so that, because it's gonna avoid the same question being asked over and over.
There's different I mean, as far as getting these qualifications for trying to get the pre-approval, as I mentioned, that started. And the social equity qualifications is a big thing.
No.
So it depends on where it's located. And I got on that interactive map, and like most of the city of Winona has at least one of the 4 categories that elevates it to a special preference of getting a license. Most of the rest of the outstate Winona County is not. So I looked at St. Charles, I looked at Lewiston, I looked at all those other cities. They're not getting any of the 4 hits on this social equity scoring. So you might see, you see the bulk of
Talk
them.
about an oxymoron.
Yeah, it's, yeah. we won't-
Okay, Madam Chair, but
Yeah.
this is our, so I just did a quick look here. Dodge County, Wabasha County both have interim ordinances.
Mhm.
And there's an interim ordinance provision within the legislation. That's from the 2023 session. I know, there's obviously things from 2024. So, but we'll find the right words and chapter and verse for creating an
It
interim.
looks like maybe, Matt, did you have something to add? We've got time here. Did you have? something
Actually, we
to add?
don't. We need to do the board of
Yeah.
equals.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We'll catch
I figured he had all the answers. Just-
I think we got a plan.
There you go, you can ask them.
Yeah,
I think we got a plan.
Yeah, we've
Yeah.
got
Yeah.
okay.
Work with Eric.
Yeah.
We can.
in between,
Yeah.
yep.
Thanks.
All right.
Bring it
Okay.
back to the next.
So
Move to adjourn.
We'll
it's,
do adjourn.
it's clear as smoke.
Weed, yeah.
Right. All right, thank you. We're adjourned.
Had fun.
Thank you.
Adjourned.
I want to call to order the Board of Appeal and Equalization. We have one order of business, and that is to approve the minutes of our meeting from June 18th.
So moved.
Second.
Commissioner Olson has moved, Commissioner Elsing has seconded. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. If anyone's opposed, say nay. That concludes our business.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
If anyone's opposed, say nay. We are adjourned. Thank you. Now you can.
Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
We will start our Winona County Board meeting with the open mic portion, public comment. Everybody and anybody can address the county board for 2 minutes per speaker. And is there anybody in the audience that would like to address the county board? I think Ms. Holte has some new employees.
Good evening.
Good
I'd
evening.
like to introduce our new Assistant Veteran Service Officer, Rolando Reyes. So Rolando, could you say a little bit about yourself and introduce to the board?
Sure. Thank you for this moment, for the time. Rolando Reyes again. I was born in El Salvador, Central America. Grew up during the Civil War. When I was 13 years old, moved up to New York, near Brooklyn, and that didn't work out, so moved up to the suburbs, Mount Kisco, New York. That's where I went to high school. From there on, I went to college. I got a scholarship soccer to go and small school in South Carolina. And I got bored a little bit, wasn't utilized correctly, and I went into the Army. So prior Army, came out, I was enlisted, deployed to Iraq, four tours plus, started enlisted, and I became an officer, a couple of fields in the Army, and after that, finished with the Army, and I continued training soldiers until last year. here at Fort McCoy in Texas and Hawaii. And my wife grew up here, so we came back here to Winona. So that's about myself. And I would like to work with the veterans and help that county and so on. So appreciate for the time.
Welcome back.
And welcome,
Thank you.
yeah, welcome
Yeah.
to Winona County.
Yeah.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Your
ladies and gentlemen.
experiences will be valuable. Thank you.
Appreciate it,
Thank you very
looking forward to it.
What part of Hawaii were you in?
Sorry?
What part of Hawaii were you in?
I was in Oahu,
Yeah.
Schofield and then
Okay.
West Side.
Nice.
Yeah, so near Colina. I don't know if you've been there.
No, no.
Great.
We had it there though,
It's
so,
great to visit.
okay.
Yes,
Very
it
well.
is. All right. Thank you. And I think we've got,
If I may,
yeah,
Madam Chair, I'd like to introduce another new employee, Chuck Elliott. He is our finance director. Chuck, if you could come up, please. Say a few words to the board.
Hi, I'm Chuck Elliott. I'm the new finance director for Winona County. Born and raised in Minneapolis. I joined the Marine Corps when I was 19, and I did 20 years with the U.S. Marine Corps, retired. I obtained a degree at night school in San Diego, California. I'm a certified public accountant, and most of my career has either been in public service with the city of Minneapolis in their finance and accounting department or in the private sector. And so recently there was some life changes and we decided to move down to this part of the state. Actually, I'm on the other side of the river where my wife grew up in Buffalo City, live over there. But so it all just came together. And so I'm really happy to be here and looking forward to serving the county and the board and its residents.
Thank you.
welcome. Thank
Glad
you.
to
Yeah,
meet
welcome to the area.
So did you
Thank you.
work with Mayor Fry?
No, that was later. I worked with Mayor Ryback and Mayor Sales Belton.
Maybe that's a good thing. Thank you. Thank you and welcome. We appreciate,
One more item.
yes.
If I may ask the board to take a moment and thank Scott for his time with us. This is his last board meeting. He's here until Friday, but Scott, do you have anything you'd like to say?
You asked me this morning. I just want to say thanks for, some of you sat on the panel that selected me. I appreciate that. I needed a transition. I needed to find a home. This was a great landing spot and, we enjoyed it here. But as Chuck said, circumstances have led to something else. And I'm not going to get to finish what we started. I had planned to be here for 5 to 10 more years. But I really appreciate it because after doing 35 years in the military, I needed to make sure that could transfer somewhere else. And, I needed to make sure who I was. And, I think it worked out great. I wish we could have done more, but we did get a lot done in 10 months. So thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Don't let the alligators bite.
You're all welcome to come visit.
Well, it's great to hear that you all came, the new hires and you're leaving, but for family. And I think family has to come first. That's what's most important, I think, in our lives. So I greatly appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. Is there anybody else that would like to address the county board? Is there anybody online? There's a couple participants, but is there anybody in participant world that would like to address the county board about anything this evening? And one final time, is there anyone wishing to address the Winona County Board? Okay, seeing nobody, we'll move on to item 3, approval of the county board meeting minutes from June 11th.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Olson, second by Commissioner Elsing to approve the June 11th meeting minutes. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Hi.
Opposed, nay. Okay, meeting minutes approved. Consent comment and approval of the agenda. We do have an amended agenda. Item 5.6 has been added to the consent business, and that is approve a resolution for a 30-day temporary emergency water surface use slow, no wake zone restrictions. So if nobody's seen that, that just got added late this afternoon, and so that is part of our consent agenda. Any comments or agenda, Commissioner Elsing,
None for me.
Commissioner Meyer?
Yeah, I would give the update on emergency management from this morning and then another thing about the hub. So
Okay.
That's it.
updates. Okay. Commissioner
Then
Olson.
on the slow no wake, I did call Sheriff Ganrud today. I noticed other counties, our neighboring counties up and down the river have been doing this, so. He, I don't know how this got brought forward, but thank you.
Agreed to do that. Good.
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, very timely. I mean, as the water's rising, very timely. We couldn't wait. So appreciate that. Anything else, Commissioner Olson?
Nope.
Okay, and I just have one announcement. And Ms. Holden?
Nothing, Madam Chair.
Okay, Attorney Sonneman?
Nothing for me.
All right.
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the amended agenda by Commissioner Elzine, seconded by Commissioner Meyer. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, approved. Ms. Holte, would you read the consent into the record, please?
Absolutely. 5.1, approve contract with Ethan Whitus. 5.2, approve temporary on-sale liquor license, Ridgeway Volunteer Fire Department. 5.3, approve 2024 solid waste collection and transportation license application. 5.4, acknowledge receipt of monthly finance and budget update for April 2024. 5.5, confirm payment of disbursements. 5.6, approve resolution for 30-day temporary emergency water surface use slow no-wake zone restriction.
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion made by Commissioner Meyer, seconded by Commissioner Olson to approve the consent business. Any further discussion? Not all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, consent business approved. All right, we have our guests from MICA, Minnesota Intercounty Association Annual Legislative Update. Now, no yelling and screaming. Let's maintain a civil environment here, because I think the last time we saw legislation, it wasn't civil or, right?
Well, I'm not sure. But good evening, Chair Ward and Commissioners. Matt Mossman, Executive Director of the Minnesota Intercounty Association. It is good to be back down in Winona County. We were very grateful for all of the work of Maureen and her team in helping all of you to help host the MICA Legislative Forum, the annual Legislative Forum in February. It was a great turnout. A lot of folks from MICA came down, and the location was fantastic, and so we really appreciated that. It was nice to be down here, and of course, always like getting down to this part of the country. I would also just want to thank Maureen, Scott, welcome Rolando and Chuck on board. Previously, I had been working with Pat Moga, but we work closely, as you know, not only Commissioner Ward and Meyer, thank you for your service on the MICA board, but we work regularly as well with various groups of staff people from across the participating the member counties, which is a really an important and valuable way, I think, that we stay connected, and so really appreciate their work and advice. I am going to, am I running slides? Someone's, okay, Heidi. Oh, hi, Heidi. Thank you. Heidi was, I know she's invisible, but she does a lot of great work. She was fantastic with the annual meeting. So I think the best way to sort of understand and frame the 2024 legislative session is that it was on the heels of the 2023 legislative session, during which an enormous amount of both budget, resource funding decisions and policy decisions got made in 2023, some of which we walked in, you're talking about, and we can talk about that a little bit later as well, cannabis, but a lot of pieces of legislation that involved fix-its and cleanup and changes this legislative session that consumed energy, as well as county priorities going in, and of course, it not being a budget year and intended to be focused on the capital bonding that framed the session also. Going to the next slide, just briefly, I like to start with the numbers. I'm kind of a numbers nerd. That's my history. It gives you a sense of two things: why the legislative session, why the legislators framed up, and the legislative leaders and the governors in particular wanting to keep the new decisions this session to be small, but also we're in a very healthy budget condition, frankly. in the near term for sure. So if you look at those first three columns, you can see the middle bottom row, that 424, that's $424 million. That's the amount of new legislative decisions that they made this session. If you net that from the 519 in the far right-hand corner, that means that there was only about $96 million of ongoing expenses. So $424 million, most of that was one-time decisions this legislative session. So just going a little bit to the left of the 424 and the green numbers there, that means that they ended session with $3.291 billion left on the bottom line unallocated, and just above that, in addition to that, $3.263 billion of budget reserves, which is together almost 9 to 10% of biennial spending. Frankly, the healthiest in my 20 plus years of doing this, I've seen the legislature end a session, a 2-year cycle of the state budget.
And Matt, for the people, what creates that surplus? Is it's sales tax, it's property tax, it's fees, license?
The big drivers in the last 2 or 3 or 4 years has been certainly those main state revenue sources. The corporate tax revenues have been way up relative to historical trends. Income tax collections have also been up. Sales tax as well, but that is probably been less of a driver than corporate and individual income tax. And then real quickly, if you go to what's highlighted in orange here, moving over to the second from the right-hand column, this is really what held kept this session sort of contained in terms of how much new was going to happen. And that is, there is a long-term projection that if you go out 3 years from now, that the new revenues for the next biennium are going to be $64.8 billion, where the new spending for that biennium is going to be $66.4 billion. So a bit of an inversion there. Often referred to as a planning structural imbalance. That narrowed from a year ago to now, and it might narrow again, but that was what was constraining things. So then jump forward. Remember that $424 million as we go to the next slide. Fully 25% of that, $109 million of that one-time money went to something that we really needed to have happen in county governments, and that is to fund the settlement for the Tyler, the retroactive claims for the Tyler Supreme Court decision that passed the House 127-0 and the Senate 66-0. As you can see, tremendous bipartisan support, and it gives some framing there. I won't go through all of the bullet points about what counties must do now. Counties, if you have any inventory in that 7-year look-back period, you must make an effort to sell it, unless it's conservation lands or part of a rehabilitation program. And then a portion of those sales revenues go back to the state to help offset some of that $109 million. And then there is an expectation that was added at the end that if there's residential units, 4 or fewer units or unimproved property, that those be offered for the first 30 days to persons who are intending to occupy them as a residence. Then if you go to the next slide, the other sort of half, the other piece of this that was really critical is how do we change the law going forward to then be compliant. A lot of work had been done by counties. A lot of work had been led by the statewide association during the interim to come up with recommendations. Micah participated in those conversations, and certainly in the lobbying effort. Representative Sandra Feist carried the legislation in the House, did a tremendous amount of work on this, bringing her attorney and legal skills to the effort, as well as Senator Westland in the Senate. That legislation was going to that we were going to marry them up at the end, but this got slowed down a little bit in the last week with some additional questions, and it ended up going into that sort of tax bill / mega bill that got passed in the last hour of session, but it did make it over the finish line. Key provisions that will change is that when now, and again, I will say for the record again, because the public is listening, this is in Minnesota, property that gets forfeited for non-payment of property tax has already gone through a 3-year period, roughly, where there's been opportunities to repurchase the property and to pay off the taxes. And there's communications from the counties that about the opportunities to do that, payment plans that can be entered into and so forth. So this is after all of that has happened and taxes and property has forfeited. It will be required to be sold at an auction. And if there is a sale value for more than a defined minimum bid in statute, that surplus will go allocated back to the owner or other lien holders or those with interests in the claims and interests in the property. And then I'm just going to drop down, rather than going through all of the bullet points there unless there's questions, that there were some additional items, again, that were added to give some additional comfort to questions that were raised on the Senate side about making sure there were sufficient protections for homeowners. The two at the bottom there, to first 30 days at auction, it must be an effort to be sold at the full estimated market value. And then if it doesn't sell at the EMV, it can be sold at the minimum bid or higher. And then there's some additional notice requirements on the web and in forums that serve diverse communities. So I'm just going to, the next page, I'm just going to highlight, there were a number of, or the next slide, there were a number of provisions that were included in the tax bill in both the House and the Senate going into conference committee that didn't end up in the final bill, and that was the House and Senate tax conferees generally were only able to come to agreement on a handful of items, mostly related to some changes to the state child care tax credit and some other state tax provisions. So both the House and Senate had a one-time increase to score grants to counties going into conference committee. The House had a one-time increase in homeless prevention aid to counties, as well as a permanent extension of that program, removing of the sunset that is scheduled to happen in 2028. There was some additional SWCD aid in the Senate side, as well as both had provisions, House and Senate had coming in a proposal for allowing cities and counties to impose a limited local sales tax for certain purposes for capital projects with a voter-approved referendum without having to go to the state for special legislation to do that, as you did for your sales tax a couple of years ago. None of that happened. So there was nothing on this page were they able to reach agreement on, and so all of these will be conversation pieces for next session. So with that, I'm going to stop and have Steve and Nancy come up, and I do want to leave some time at the end to talk for sure about some environmental things that we also followed and lobbied on that are relevant to Winona County here.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. It's always nice to be in Winona County, and as you can see, we got around the town a little bit today and enjoyed the museum and had a great dinner over here at, I think it's called Nosh. And so it's always nice to be here. And let me just take you through what did and didn't happen in transportation this year. And basically, I can summarize it by saying that just about everything that had to do with transportation in this session was housed in one of 4 bills. There was a transportation omnibus policy bill that did pass, and a transportation omnibus finance bill that passed. And then there was the regular bonding bill that did not pass, and a cash bonding bill that came awfully close, about literally 1 minute to midnight, but did not pass. And so let me be specific and take you through them. House File 3436, which became Chapter 104, was the omnibus transportation policy bill. It was filled with items, policy items that were essentially very nonpartisan, very not too complicated, straightforward stuff. And the final vote on it reflected that. It was 67-0 in the Senate, and it was a strong bipartisan vote in the House. There was one item in the bill that did directly relate to our transportation MICA platform this year. Historically, we've been opposed to exceptions to truck weights. And it was a good year for that. There were only two exceptions in terms of bills that passed. Both were pretty narrow in scope. One was an exemption for sewage trucks that were performing emergency services. And then a highly specialized one involving just about 2 miles of a roadway up in northwestern Minnesota in East Grand Forks. But it had to do with these very large trucks coming over the border from North Dakota for the sugar beet industry. And what killed it initially in committee was the Teamsters Union got very concerned about these trucks. They're sort of on the size and order of what you've seen up in the Iron Range. And I think that they believe that these may be the first types of vehicles to drive without drivers. And so they were able to stop in committee, but the Senate Minority Leader comes from up there, and the former Senate Majority Leader does a little lobbying now, combined, and on a floor amendment in the Senate, it passed pretty much unanimously. So those were the two exceptions. Let me take you then to House File 5242, which was the Conference Committee report on the Omnibus Transportation Finance Bill, combined with the Labor Finance Bill and the Housing Finance Bill. Sort of a new twist to the end of the session that we could spend a lot of time talking about in terms of whether it's a good or a bad idea, but it is a fact this year. So this bill took a very interesting route before it reached the governor's desk. The last 3 nights of the final week of the session, the conference committee met every night. Finally, on Wednesday night around midnight, it passed, got out to the House and Senate floors. It sat there till Saturday with 2 days to go, and then it was sent back into conference committee and opened up, and it became the vehicle for the Lyft Uber deal, which you might have seen on TV and radio the last couple of days. A lot of attention paid to that, a lot of people interested in that, and that's where it ended up. But then on the final night, the tax bill that was referenced by Matt a little earlier became the vehicle for the Transportation, Labor, and Housing Conference report, along with 6 or 7 other major bills that all got put into this one tax vehicle. When they were done with it, it was 1,500 pages. And that passed the Senate, previously passed the House, it passed the Senate on the last night of the session, literally inside 5 minutes to midnight. So what was in it? Well, in terms of money, transportation wasn't a real high priority this year on the part of leadership, so it was only allocated $2 million in actual new state cash. Later on, that was doubled to $4 million. But through the cancellation process and some other fiscal maneuverings, they actually were able to package together $117.5 million, mostly through the use of trunk highway bonds, trunk highway fund, spread throughout the state. The biggest split was 15 million each for the state road construction account and the Corridors of Commerce, which I think is a program most of us are familiar with now. And most people seem to like it. It does quite a bit of good around the state. So that was the financial end of the finance bill. Then let's just touch on the policy aspect of the bill. One of the things it did was it established the Minnesota Advisory Council on Infrastructure, which is a bill that I sat through a lot of hearings on. The goal of the bill, it's modeled after a program in Michigan that a lot of people seem to think has been successful. And the idea is over time to study all these different types of infrastructure projects, look for ways to save money, look for ways to be efficient, and look for ways to prioritize them in terms of matters of importance involving safety and other kinds of things. And so that will be part of our future discussions related to transportation infrastructure and other types of infrastructure. The issue that we spent a lot of time on, and I think all of you got interested in this, is in 2023, like Matt said, all the big money was spent, including in transportation, huge amounts of new revenues that will be permanent unless there's statutory changes to alter that. But there were also some important policy issues that kind of came over the top at the same time everybody was focused on money. And one of them involved the issue of transportation greenhouse gas emissions assessments. And there was a task force that was created out of that bill that became very important. And Dave, your county engineer, who I've spent a lot of time with over the last decade, and a lot of his MICA engineer colleagues spent enormous amounts of time on this. This task force met every other week, starting in July of 2023 through February of 2024, leading into this last session. And of course, what was driving this was a variety of efforts to try to curtail greenhouse gases, and transportation was a real focus of those discussions for a variety of reasons. What came out of it were three fairly significant changes that I don't think would have happened without the input of these MICA engineers. For starters, there were changes in terms of project analysis requirements, shifting the original bill from a project-to-project analysis to a statewide portfolio analysis, which gives more room and flexibility to make progress on the greenhouse gas, but do it more in a combination of ways that will still allow most of these projects to go forward, and also to blend out the cost of these projects, because this process will add cost to these construction projects. Secondly, and right in line with that, there was created an ongoing technical advisory committee so that on an ongoing basis, and the committee's been given some significant powers, they can continue to recommend to the body politic, ways and things that can be done to continue to make this efficient, incorporate these new environmental changes, but to mitigate the costs. And then I think the third thing that was really important was they retained safety as a top priority for road and bridge construction projects, mixed in with all this new criteria, but they retained safety as a top priority, and that I think was very important, which then takes us to bonding. And I think everybody here understands that in the legislative process, you have your regular budget bills and policy bills that take 50% to pass, but capital bonding bills take 60%. So unless it's an overwhelming mandate for one party or the other, by the nature of the definitions and the statutes and the Constitution, you need 60% to pass a bonding bill, which means people have got to get along and they got to negotiate and get to the finish line. And unfortunately, that just simply did not happen in this session for a variety of reasons. But they worked at it right up until the end, and based on some pronouncements and projections of the two bonding chairs with a few days left to go, we know that if they had been able to get it done, we would have made progress in the areas that we always support, which is local county road and bridge money, local road wetland mitigation money, ports, like in Winona, there was money for that. It totaled about $110 million out of a projected $980 million bonding bill, which would be a pretty good ratio when judged against bonding bills of the last 2 decades. So that kind of brings us to the end, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
What was the holdup? Was there something big that they were going back and forth on?
There was their normal infighting, but actually people had been getting along pretty good. I would say that
Ego?
well, there's always that. I was one, so I can say it. But I think probably the single biggest thing that nobody could have planned for that became a huge problem in the Senate, and you all read about it and saw it on the TV news, but this state senator from Woodbury, Nicole Mitchell, and this kind of bizarre situation where she's caught burglarizing what at one time I guess was partially her house. She actually had a key to the place. But it might have blown over or just been handled as a matter of course, but because of the unique situation where with her in office, the Democrats had a 1-vote margin, The Republicans lined up pretty hard on it. And that all of a sudden, in the last 2 weeks of the session in particular, became a big roadblock because both sides are caucusing and reinforcing their own views. And of course, she was charged with a felony. That obviously hasn't played out in the courts yet. They did go through the process of ethics committee hearings initially and so on and so forth. But, when you have to pass with 60%, you're starting out with a 1-vote margin, and then something like this intervenes. I mean, if the majority party had had a 5-vote margin, it probably would have been resolved and wouldn't have mattered. But because of all the other issues that were affected by it, and because of what they thought they should get in return for the negotiations to still get it done, it didn't get done. So I would say that was the one unusual item that had an impact.
Steve, looking into your magic crystal ball or shake the 8-ball or whatever, now with, and I've read a few letter editor type of things, with the created devastation of the flooding across the state of Minnesota, do you think there might be a chance of a special session to go in and improve some bonding? Or are they just going to try and pass emergency, whatever it's called, federal and state, to help with all the flood damage to our infrastructure?
Well, I think you've just explained what the balance will be. I don't think they would automatically go into special session without first reviewing the economics of the state. There may be various types of funds that could be used to solve some of these problems between now and January. If not, there'd be an inclination to want to have a special session to do that. But I'm sure the governor, before he called it, would want to have certain agreements with the House and Senate leadership, and particularly with the Senate Republicans, because they would not want a replay of how the session ended, which wasn't very pretty. And so I'm sure those negotiations are going on as we speak, but I don't think it's automatic that there'll be one. But because of all the human misery and otherwise, if that's what people think should happen, they'll try to negotiate a situation where the special session will be focused just on that.
Okay.
Then if I might, I just want to say thanks to all you folks. This is going to be my last presentation to the Winona County Board, and I've enjoyed it very much. You've got a great county, and I know you'll keep it that way. And I'll certainly be back to visit. So I want to thank you for all the many courtesies. And Dave isn't here tonight.
Ballot this fall, then, is it?
What's that?
Your name's not on a ballot this fall, is it?
No, I did that 12 times, so I don't need to do that again. So,
Well, enjoy
yeah, thank you.
Appreciate your knowledge. It'll be
Yeah.
hard
Yeah,
to replace.
that's exactly right.
Yeah.
So, you're very kind. Thank you. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Come back and spend those tourist dollars. Though.
Yeah.
Maybe
Maybe a lot of stuff you could buy.
Good evening, Nancy.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Nancy Selesky, and I represent Micah in the area of Health and Human Services, Public Health and Human Services, and it's a pleasure to be here tonight. I'm not retiring. I'm telling everybody that right from the start. So where are we? Okay, we're going to start with emergency medical services. There was a bipartisan bill that actually passed. It was quite fun to see that happen. Interestingly, it was almost all Micah legislators that were authors of it. And basically what it does, it's replacing the Emergency Medical Services Regulatory Board with a new state office of emergency medical services. And so all those duties will be transferred to the new office by January 1st of 2025. When they were looking at the need of how much money was needed, the initial ask was $120 million. They didn't get that, but they made some progress. In the end, there was $30 million appropriated, and $24 million of that will go to certain ambulance services that have been having issues with the not being reimbursed for when a vehicle isn't, for instance, is not occupied. If there's a 911 call, somebody goes out and somebody's fallen and they're not transported, you don't get reimbursed for that. So that's one of the issues that they're trying to address. So there is a 2-year pilot program that will be looking at the results of that in 2026 to see what can be done to kind of make that process a little bit more efficient. The next item has been around for a long time. It was the African American Family Preservation Act. And again, they've been working on it for a while. This again is a pilot program. DHS is to establish a 2-year pilot. Hennepin and Ramsey counties are the 2 counties that are in that pilot, and it goes into effect on January 1st of 2025. However, under that is a working group that will provide guidance and oversight to that pilot. At Micah's request, we were added as an appointing authority. We wanted to make sure that there was geographical balance and counties of all sizes are represented in this area because Hennepin and Ramsey obviously have issues that Winona doesn't. So we will be working with the other county organizations on making sure that we get the right people at the table during this interim. The working group is to develop a plan to go statewide by September of 2026, and then the effective date for going statewide is January 2027. As you all know, Health and Human Services can be hard to follow, myself included. As an example, the House has a Children's and Families subcommittee that does not match up necessarily with the Senate. It falls in the full Senate Health and Human Services Committee. They took pieces of that subcommittee on children and families and actually put it in the K-12 education bill. So we were watching education as in addition to Health and Human Services. That bill was carried by Representative Dave Pinto from St. Paul, Senator Melissa Wicklund from Bloomington, and that was a standalone bill that passed on its own. Governor did sign that bill. In terms of what's in there, there's some language relating to child protection and welfare. It requires a review of child fatalities and near fatalities, requires counties to establish local child mortality review teams, and requires DHS to provide training and support to local units of government on this. There's a new Supreme Court Council on Child Protection that's being created. DHS is also directed to review the systems in other states and come up with a recommendation on common entry points for the initial reporting of the child maltreatment. They're to study that and report back next year. And they're also to develop a new IT system. I know what could go wrong. Called the Comprehensive Child Welfare Information System, and that will allow us to be able to track some of the cases that are out there more easily.
But that's not replacing the old green screen. It's a different.
Madam Chair, new system, but I'm going to get to the green screen. They did put $10 million into SSIS, which is something that counties have been working on for a long time. We asked for $27 million, didn't get the full 27, but did get the 10, and we'll be back again next year looking for more. In talking with the department, that $10 million, they're going to be starting to look at consultants to start looking at that. So hopefully there'll be some movement on that we'll be able to see soon. They also put $1 million into child care improvement grants. In terms of policy, there's language that allows child care centers and family child care providers to develop a policy regarding immunization for children over 2 months of age. They created a family child care ombudsperson position at $350,000 a year ongoing. And one of the things that we've been working on that did not get included that we're disappointed with is we were looking for a child welfare fiscal analysis. We want to be able to push out what it is that counties are investing in the child protection system. And unfortunately, that piece did get dropped. But we'll continue to work and press on that. Then we'll move on to the Human Services Bill. This is Senator Hoffman from Champlin, Representative Newer, Minneapolis. And that did pass as a standalone bill as well. There were a few tweaks made to min choices, some modifications that will simplify that tool some. As an example, it allows counties to continue contracting for min choices assessments. It eliminates the requirement for 2 years of home and community-based services experience specifically to be an assessor. It modifies the timeline in which a county must visit an individual that has requested an assessment from 20 calendar days to 20 business days or working days. And it extends the validity of min choices assessments from 60 days to 365 days. The thing that we've been pounding on for a long time that did not happen is the reassessments that we have to do annually. That tool, that reassessment can take 6, 8, 10 hours each year. And for those folks whose situations are not changing from year to year, we're looking to try and pass something that's more expedited so that they don't have to sit through that assessment. We know their situation's not going to change. Unfortunately, there's interaction with the federal government on that, so there was a fiscal note related to that. Again, not a budget year technically this year, so something that we want to go back next year on, and we also want to request the local impact note on that, not just what the state cost is, but what it's costing counties. The bill also includes a legislative task force on guardianship, which will include a county appointee. And they did address some jail health. DHS is required to submit a waiver application for an MA demonstration project to provide health care and services to bridge community-based services for individuals that are in our correctional facilities. It also creates a reentry services working group that includes counties. And also I want to mention that there's a pilot program to provide payment to counties to support correctional facilities in administering long-acting injectable antipsychotic meds for people that are undergoing mental health treatment or in need of mental health treatment. We've been talking about priority admissions and the civil commitment process for a very long time, also known as the 48-hour rule. There was a task force that was appointed about maybe a year and a half ago. Commissioner Terrell Clark from Stearns County sits on it, and Blue Earth County Director Angie Youngerberg. And they kind of, along with a lot of other folks, hospitals, the department, there's a lot of folks on that work group, and they brought their recommendations to the legislature to actually fix the problem, and, or in other words, create the capacity that's needed both at the state level and the community level. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars to resolve that, and that did not happen. We got a couple of things I want to mention. Last year, we got a county cost reprieve for those folks that have been committed as mentally ill and dangerous that are awaiting a placement in one state-operated facility and going to another. As an example, the Anoka Metropolitan Regional Treatment Center waiting for a bed in St. Peter. We counties have no ability to effectuate that transfer. So we did get a 2-year reprieve that we would not have to pay the county cost share for that. And I think the last note that I saw, I think it saved counties $8 million for just half a year. So that's a fairly significant chunk of change. This year, they did modify that language to include folks that are coming from the correctional system as well, so for a period of time. However, I want to mention this ends next year, so we're going to have to stay on top of this, and we keep plugging away not just on the MIND, but for all these folks that are in such desperate need for mental health care. And we agree, we need to do it. There's also language that does establish a mentally ill and dangerous civil commitment reform task force. And then the hospitals. Hospitals have been talking for a long time about they're boarding certain people that have mental health issues and nowhere again for them to go. HCMC testified that they had somebody at their hospital for 2 years that was getting no treatment. They were just being boarded there, waiting to get into St. Peter. So the legislature did take a 10-person exception to move those folks that have been in that situation into St. Peter as quickly as they can. I think that is probably it on that issue. Sorry. I think that's it on that bill. So then let's move on quickly to the Health and Human Services Bill, which is Senator Wickland and Representative Liebling. And this is one of the bills that was the last to be resolved on that last Sunday of session. I think they met at 4 o'clock. The conference committee unveiled the bill. No time, of course, to pass the bill as a standalone. So this was one of the bills that got amended into that omnibus tax mega bill. And I'll just hit you with some of the highlights. It does require the Commissioner of Human Services to report by next year to the legislature on alternative healthcare delivery models and a county-administered rural medical assistance model, or CARMA. We have a new acronym, CARMA. The telecommunications fee was set at 12 cents per month per line, and that is for the operation and maintenance of the 988 suicide prevention and crisis system.
How many dollars does that's a lot of dollars.
Madam Chair, I would have to get back to you. I'm not sure what it generates in
That's
terms of
every
cell phone every month.
cents a month.
Yeah.
That's a lot of dollars.
Yeah, it is. And then something we've also been working on for a long time is establishing mental health services as a medical assistance benefit for kids. And that is something that was included in the bill. The commissioners to work with counties, tribes, other providers, et cetera, and come back to the legislature on October 1st on how to get this done. But again, this would provide MA coverage for kids that are in residential mental health crisis facilities. We do it for adults, we don't do it for kids. So this is something that we all agree needs to be done. Prior authors,
If you, just if I may, if
Sorry.
you figure half the people have a cell phone,
Oh.
so this, they 2.5 million at 12 cents a month, 3.6 million. That's a fifth, only counting 50% of people have a cell phone.
Yeah.
That's a lot of cash. That's a lot of money.
you're good with spreadsheets, right in your head. I didn't,
I mean, it's
Yeah.
interesting how
Yeah.
much money that 12 cents can generate.
for sure. I think the legislature authorized up to 25 cents a line, but they established it at 12 at this point. So there is some wiggle room to even increase it more.
Yeah, that's just cell phones.
Just so, yeah. I want to mention prior authorization. They have been talking about that for a long time. The Minnesota Medical Association, in particular, the providers have been saying for a long time that they spend more time processing these claims, and so many of them end up getting approved, and it's just a waste of their time, et cetera. So they've been talking about it for a long time. They made some modest, I would say, changes this year. There's a prohibition on prior auth for outpatient mental health treatment and outpatient substance use disorder treatment, but it does not include medications. And that, of course, is a large part of it. So I think we'll see more on that, but that's where they started this year. And it's a big deal for Chair Liebling in the House. And so some progress there. There is a couple of miscellaneous things I want to mention. Adds rural mental health service providers. This is outside of the 7-county metro area and the larger cities to be eligible recipients of mental health services grants. The Commissioner of Health is required to publish an RFI to assist in a comprehensive evaluation of current healthcare needs in the state. And I want to mention that counties are to notify an Indian child's tribe or tribes no later than 24 hours after receiving a report of a missing child. That was also included in that bill. And there's a whole lot of other things, and we're in the process of putting together a report.
Was that just Indian children or any children, just in specific to Indian tribes?
Madam Chair, it's specific to Indian tribes, yeah, Indian children.
Okay. What's the protocol for any other kid? Is it 24 hours? Is it 24? I don't know. Is it 24 hours or is it less?
I don't know the answer to that, I'm sorry. Yeah. And with that, I will be happy to answer any questions. There was a lot, and yes, it was an ugly finish.
Thank you for trying to herd the cats.
Yep.
We keep pushing the rock. It's uphill all the way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm back, and I'm going to work from my computer if I can get it to stay here. Nancy, as she commented, certainly there is a huge amount in human services in addition to all the many things she summarized, and we will be coming out hopefully within the next week. Our full summary of all of the work that we worked on, and or most of what we worked on. We go beyond that a little bit to catch things that we didn't have a chance to weigh in on, but things largely the things we worked on your behalf. I want to, on this last slide, I'm going to jump around a little bit just because of the audience and where we are at as well. I want to really think we appreciate working with your legislative delegation, Representative Jacob, Senator Miller, and particularly want to call out, especially in a time of all of the heavy rains that have been hitting Minnesota. Representative Plowski has been just a tremendous leader at the Capitol, as you all know, for so many years. And one of the things that I have worked on with him over the years quite a bit is his focus on taking care of the state and on the disaster assistance account. And I recall that talking about a special legislative session, which may possibly happen. But one of the other things that is in place, thanks to Senator Polsky, that really minimizes the need necessarily to do that urgently, is that there is an established disaster assistance account that immediately makes money available for the funding the federal match when that comes along, as well as setting a state disaster assistance money at a lower threshold to qualify for. And in addition to all of his work in the past, he was also successful this legislative session at getting language added to the bill such that, to legislation such that if the fiscal year, the biennium ends, a state fiscal year does, closes at a $50 million or more than was projected at the end of session, those additional revenues or some amount up to $50 million, those amounts will go to replenish that disaster assistance fund up to $50 million. So in all likelihood, the state's been on a good trajectory. The monthly collection reports have been coming in positive, so there's a reasonable chance that that fund not only does it have money in it now, don't know what the balance is, but that it will get replenished thanks to that legislation. So I want to cover a couple things you all know, and I want to thank as well Commissioner Ward and Commissioner Meyer tremendously for your expertise on water issues and how closely you have followed those issues and participation in a subgroup of MICA board members who brought expertise to the legislature and met with the governor's office on nitrate concerns. Obviously, there was coverage of the southeastern Minnesota counties in that regard. And so I wanted to also highlight the legislature did take action on a number of fronts. And so jumping down to that third bullet there under environment, and I'll come back, but there was specifically in two bills, both in the legacy bill that had some additional money. So from the Clean Water Fund, $2.79 million was appropriated for a voluntary program in Dodge, Fillmore, Goodhue, Houston, Mower, Olmsted, Wabasha, and Winona. And I won't repeat all of those counties, but those 8 counties will come up a number of times here, to conduct an inventory of private wells, provide testing for nitrates, develop education and outreach for private well owners and users. In addition, $3.4 million was appropriated to expand the ag best management practices, loans for water quality related projects, of which $3 million must be spent in southeastern Minnesota. There was $1 million for monitoring and evaluating trends in the concentration of nitrate in groundwater and to promote and develop and evaluate regional and crop-specific nutrient best management practices in cooperation with the University of Minnesota providing technical assistance. And then additionally, in the Ag and Energy Supplemental Bill, there was $495,000 one-time funding for soil health financial assistance and $2.8 million in nitrate mitigation funding for the karst geology region of Southeast, again, the same 8 counties. That $2.8 million appropriation is to be used for nitrate home water treatments such as reverse osmosis and other private homeowner mitigation efforts, and it's to target households at 300% of federal poverty level or below to the extent possible, and can include education, outreach, and technical assistance to homeowners. And then the Ag Fertilization Research Education Council 40-cent per ton fertilizer fee that was set to expire on June 30th of this year was extended 5 years. to June 30th of 2029. A big part of that conversation was how it was going to be used. The uses were kept largely the same. The membership of the AFREC was expanded to include experts in sustainable agriculture and public health to bring that expertise into the council. And then there was some expansion for eligible projects can now also include regenerative agriculture practices and protection of clean water. So those are some of the specific things that happened that I think are really relevant to what is happening down here. And I think it also really, more than anything else, my expectation is that it educated and set the table for more conversations when we get to a biennial budget session next year. Then just real quickly, a major piece of legislation that passed this year in the solid waste area, which is an area that we spend a lot of time on. We didn't get the SCORE dollars that we were hoping for, but there was passage of, it's actually technically called the Packaging Waste and Cost Reduction Act. So that new legislation it's an extended producer responsibility model. So all manufacturers, packagers of material, it falls on the shoulders of the company that brands the packaging, will have to participate in a producer responsibility organization. They will pay fees that are set. The fee structure will be intended to incentivize less toxic, more renewable and reusable materials in the packaging, and then to reduce the packaging. And the revenue stream from that will help offset costs for entities that are service providers, of which you are one. So local governments, counties that do a lot of solid waste work will also be eligible for some reimbursements of the costs that you currently incur for recycling and reduction.
So it's specific to where it is packaged, or is it specific to the company residing and they could be doing packaging somewhere else?
No, it'll be anybody, it'll be where you're selling. If you're selling a product in Minnesota that is branded whatever, that packaging will be subject to the producer having to, even if you're a company from outside of Minnesota, you will have to, and you're selling into Minnesota, you'll have to become part of the producer responsibility
So it's
organization.
just, how do they keep track of what comes in and is sold?
I don't know exactly, but they know things.
The honor system,
I know my
like this
my
model now.
my multi-decade expertise is in taxes, and so I mean we know who's selling into the state of Minnesota for a collection of tax purposes, for example. So I don't know the specific mechanics of administratively how it will work. My guess is there will be also a compliance effort on some end, right? You'll have to you'll be required to by law, but then if someone is found out to be packaging materials and not be part of the PRO, I'm sure there'll be some compliance mechanism to then have them require them to register as part of the PRO. It's a good question. I don't have the specifics of the mechanics, but it works in the tax system, and there'll be some form of registration requirement.
Question for you, Matt, the researchers, how many times can this Coke bottle be recycled? It says I'm 100% recycled, recycle me again.
I don't know.
I don't know either. How many times can you recycle?
In reporting what happened, I don't claim any particular expertise on the science of recyclables or plastics for sure.
A revenue enhancement we can get out of that. State of Minnesota.
If I can get some more information, Commissioner Elsing, I will forward it on the mechanics of how that'll work.
Because
Yeah.
ultimately it punishes the end user, because somebody's got to pay for it,
Yeah.
right? So the end user is going to pay for it.
Mhm.
So really, in reality, it's a tax on the end user. It's just going to, the businesses aren't going to, and I get it, I get what they're trying to do, but ultimately it's a tax on the end user. That's what it is.
Mhm. Yep.
Business ain't going to absorb it. They're going to pass it on. So the end user is actually paying for it. And it actually creates a situation where one more strike against business in Minnesota, they have one more cost they've got to incur and try to figure out how to move it on. And that's why I ask about the regulation of it, because really, if there is an oversight, the guy that plays, it's just one more law that the guy that plays nice in the sandbox is going to get punished. the guy that doesn't. That's why I'm curious, how are they gonna track it? It also could be if it's internal, if it's whatever goes out, if it's produced here, let alone sold outside, again, it drives business back out of the state, because if they've got to fund something that the competition doesn't, it's one more cost. And it's pretty minimal. Now, in business, it's all these costs add up. So it'd be interesting to see what they do. We package stuff, and I own a company. We package stuff and but sell it all throughout the United States. And we're doing more of that as we're putting more and more things into our brand. But at the same time, if something comes into my warehouse that gets assesses a tax because it came into the state of Minnesota, but then I redistribute it back out, I can't get out of that tax. Because if it comes in, if it's on the ingoing side or the outgoing side. So these are real things in business that you got to look at that I think oftentimes in politics, they don't really understand. It sounds good at surface value, but it has a detrimental effect on businesses. So.
And I think those points were all part of the conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, so it'd be interesting to see what they're going to do there.
There was also the creation of a critical materials recovery task force, which is to look at how Minnesota could go about maximizing the amount of critical materials that are planned to be recovered before something goes into a landfill or into waste prior to have recovery at the end of life cycle of products. And also a boat wrap stewardship program that was created. So those are some of the solid waste activities that happened. We spent a fair amount of time, Scott can vouch for, I won't go into all of the specifics, but one of the areas where there was a lot of fix-it as well was in labor and pensions and benefit laws that also affect you as an employer. Earned sick and safe time and paid family medical leave both had legislation that made adjustments to what was passed last year. And we were successful at getting a number of changes in the earned sick and safe time changes that just helps things sync up a little bit better, hopefully, with the way county and local governments work. And then I would just add, cannabis is something that we followed. I commented to Chair Ward, well, you were on break before you started the meeting, that we were in Rice County this morning, so we had a double header today. They did pass an ordinance that I believe, now I'm realizing I should have been listening more closely when we were there, but I believe that what they addressed today was on the growing, and then they also have scheduled a public hearing and comment in early July that I think will deal with the retailing. So they are one county to reach out to. There have been several others in the MICA membership that are considering it. Of course, there were a number of changes. We will summarize. One of them is to accelerate the growing that can start earlier, and so I think counties have been sort of responding how the retailing is theoretically on the same timeline as it always has been, awaiting the final development of rules. And just incidentally, as on our way down this morning, the acting director of the Office of Cannabis Management was on public radio, because the social equity applications have started to come in, and there are quite a few of them. I thought the number was 500, but I'm not sure. But they expect a number of them, and of course these are early. They're early filings. I think the actual application, the first application deadline is July 24th. I'm quite certain, and then they'll start processing from there.
Overload them and see how they handle it.
It did sound like it was going to be quite a bit of work. Happy to answer any questions. Again, thank you very much for your membership, and we look forward to, as we are already starting to do so, to 2025. I appreciate your thoughts.
Question, I'm hoping it just was a nasty rumor that the legislators were considering becoming full-time. That was a nasty rumor that was floating around, wasn't it?
I think that there has been some, Commissioner Meyer, Commissioner Ward, some growing interest in that. Not in our line of work. But I don't know that there's traction on that. Yeah.
It's dangerous. When an idea is floated, it never seems to really go away.
Well, there were, if Heidi would go to the next slide, there were a package of things that were sorted through last year, which was the first time in a long time that the legislature actually kind of sorted through a little bit with much rigor what is in the Constitution versus what is in statute and how they operate. One thing that they did change is that they historically have always come back by statute on the first Tuesday following the first Monday in January, which can be as early as January 2nd. And they've changed that to the second Tuesday following the first Monday. And so this next year, they come back actually as late as possible, which is January 14th.
Big change.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I also appreciate the work that Representative Plowski did over the years. But, one thing that I hate to say he did not accomplish in my book is he really tried to limit the number of bills that were presented at the legislature. And it just, it's mind boggling how many things that they throw, on the wall and see what sticks. And you do have to sort through them. So appreciate your sorting through them, but somehow we've got to curtail our aggressive bill filing or something. I mean,
It keeps us moving.
yeah.
I wanted to thank you, Nancy and Steve. Good luck. We'll miss you. And Matt, for being on the board, I would say that, I appreciated the lobbying that you do. I also appreciate all the education that you do in terms of telling us what the heck these particular things mean as the legislation and the conversations are going on. I find that really beneficial. I think our staff probably does too. And it is also really useful, the breakdowns that you will send us of like, this is county program aid is going to change, or you're going to get one-time money for public safety, and you can estimate for us by county what that's going to be. That's really helpful. And I know Pat Moga always used those numbers. So
Good.
thank you
Good.
for everything you do.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Safe travels home.
Thank you.
Hopefully you appreciate, we moved our meeting time up so you can drive home in the daylight now.
for ice cream, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before you leave Winona County though.
Yes.
Right.
Drop a 20 in the bucket on the way out.
You to buy it in Rochester.
Don't go to Rochester. Well, they're Olmsted, they're your county.
Let's go. It's a.
Free to come into Winona County. We tax you to get out.
Yeah. There you go. Right, let's see, moving on to committee reports, Commissioner Meyer, you had a couple updates?
Yes, yeah, so I said most of this, I think, before. The Emergency Coordinating Council met this morning. I didn't realize it. Apparently, we're one of only 2 counties in the region that hasn't declared a disaster. Ben was going to be calling the townships today to see if the total ends up being enough money to meet the threshold. He said that there was a mutual aid call on Thursday. And unknown to all of us, but this is the wonderful thing about having an emergency management organization. They were coordinating with the Winona Fire Department, and they had boats and certified swiftwater trained rescue teams all set up that night on Thursday, thinking that if the water trained over us and not over other counties, that we would be in a really bad situation. So I'm super grateful for that, all that work that goes on, that lucky that we don't have to actually know about it. The other thing is that I went this afternoon, the Winona Community Hub, which if we do approve the navigator position with our opioid funding, they would be embedded at the hub. So they gave a presentation about how they work, why they work, how many clients they've served, all the different pathways, how it works. So if anybody's interested in I brought just a couple pieces of documentation. You're welcome to have it. That's it.
All right, okay. Just one thing, today I attended the Dakota Fiber build out. The Centec, the rural cooperative, is doing a fiber build out in the Dakota area, which will add like 623 locations. It's an $8 million project. And Bree Mackey was there, and Bree's our local broadband, and it's nice to know Bree. Some of the cost, about 3.2 million comes from a grant, and then Centec is investing 6.8 million. And one of Bree's comments is that, you know, the Comcasts of the world are not going to build out rural America. There's just too high of a cost. There's not enough service here, you know, customers per line and such. So she greatly respects and depends on our rural co-ops throughout the rural part of the county or state, even state, to take on these projects. And I did share, remember we had the one taxpayer that wanted a reduction in their rates because of, I shared that with the group, that they wanted a reduction in their property taxes because they did not have good internet. And I said, it's become, when you buy a rural property now, you need water, you got to consider the septic system, and you need broadband. It's become an essential leg of living in the rural area. But a great project, they're working on it, they're digging the lines in as we speak. And we need to support, I know there's a whole nother group of money coming for broadband. She had a name for it, but I don't remember. And I know Centec's applied for some, and I know My Energy is trying to do some of the same things. So we can't depend on the big mega companies to build us out. They're just not going to do it. So we need to support the smaller rural locations. Other than that,
You are not going to talk about the county fair?
well, I could. It's coming up, fast and furious.
I didn't say it, but
Okay.
the
Yes,
10th
remember.
of July
County
is
fair.
Public Safety Day.
Okay, Winona County Fair in great city of St. Charles runs technically July 9th is the non-livestock, but it really kicks off on the 10th through Sunday the 14th. If anybody really wants to help out, I know they're always looking for volunteers. The 4-H is looking for volunteers to help with clerking on the first day. I know our emergency management people will be there. Hopefully we have no emergencies. We want a low-key, non-emergency fair. But it's a great time. It's free. People don't realize they can park on the street in St. Charles and walk in, or they can pay a nominal fee to park, and you can get your fix on mini donuts and corn dogs.
Onion rings are real
Onion
good.
rings, yeah.
Onion rings are the best.
Okay, cheese curds. I love the cheese curds, fresh pieces.
They
And
did
the
it.
malt wagon.
They announced today that
Yes.
dairy cows are gonna go virtual, which is very disappointing.
What, the flu?
Because of the flu, yeah.
Here at the
So,
fair?
yeah, so any county fair, yeah, that just got announced today. I was just pulling it up here.
Really? No
Yeah.
dairy cows?
So many dairy cows, but they just made mention of dairy cows. The heifer, calf, and yearlings will still be there. But anything lactating, it looks like anything lactating.
Lactating. Oh, man, then the barns are gonna be. Oh, and Katie Ketchum, a local
fair.
local Altura young lady is in the top 10. She will get her head carved out of butter at the Minnesota State Fair. So that's a big honor for Jerry.
You're going to miss
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, he's got Wisconsin.
You ever seen it? You ever gone up and seen it? Pretty neat, actually.
We got
that's
Princess
pretty
Day, the Milky Way, but it's a very big honor to have a local person compete in that. It really is. So if you see Katie,
That's neat.
say, wish her well. Any other business to come before the Winona County Board?
Motion to adjourn.
We have a motion by Commissioner Olson, second by Commissioner Meyer to adjourn. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Adjourn.